One is betrayed by the weather, one is betrayed by the traffic, one is betrayed by...
demonetization.
A good one. One is betrayed by people not smelling good, and so on and so forth. Sometimes you're betrayed by a whiskey which promises much more than it is. I noticed you wrote your book with single malts. I started the single malt club in Bombay, and sometimes you get a fake single malt, which is not so nice. So that's a betrayal.
It's probably the worst kind.
Namita.
Betrayal. Yeah, I think the biggest betrayal, I think, is what we do to ourselves, isn't it? When we kind of, I think, give up, tell ourselves lies. I think New Year's, absolutely. So I think you can only get betrayed by somebody if somewhere inside you've kind of given up. Otherwise, I don't know if you can really be betrayed.
No, but that's a profound one, what you just talked about.
You know, I think betrayal is also very subjective. It could be betrayal to you, and for the other person, it's a judgment, it's a decision. So it's all relative, right?
No, but what Namita speaks about, I think, is very profound, simply because I think that's the betrayal which happens the most often. Because you can think of a goal, you want to do something, and you let yourself down, so you betray yourself. And I think most of us do that all the time, and we do it to ourselves. Right?
So what you're saying is that we set ourselves up for betrayal. Yeah? Is that what you're saying? That we sort of want to believe the other person, and we willingly go down that path, and we say, somewhere in the back of our head, we do know.
Why don't you ask Sanjay?
Very scared of the answer.
Like the whole of America has just betrayed themselves.
Arshad is on a roll. I think we should just give him a...
I'll be arrested straight after this discussion.
And if you hang on long enough, he'll reveal all. So yeah. So yes, but I strongly resonate with what he said about malts and how they can be single or otherwise. But I think that yes, I think as human relation we set ourselves up for betrayals because we are preconditioned to it. We have these false sense of entitlements, etc., etc. And what Arshad said is very right, that one man's betrayal may be another man's nationalism or another man's patriotism, you never know. Then of course Arshad would agree with me on that.
I agree with everything you say.
Okay, so agree with this one. I know that it's coming from your heart. So when we were of course young and foolish, we used to feel that...
last year.
Yes, that was it. Last year, I think long. We used to feel that being true to one person is a betrayal of an entire gender. So, you know, we are now old and foolish.
We were young and foolish earlier. We were young and foolish, now we are old and writers.
Right after this panel, you're going to get the divorce papers. That's going to be the end of that. And okay. So what the next question is a little bit more serious, which is also sort of contained in the book, is the idea that is history fact or fiction? Just to elaborate a little bit, historical fiction is making a huge sort of, there's a revival of it worldwide. Everyone's picking little gaps in history and making mega series, mega books, mega films out of it. I'd like to know from our amazing panelists. Tishu, you've done a film which is in editing right now on the Red Fort trials. So what part is fact, what part is fiction? Is history someone's opinion? Is it a victor's manuscript? Is it in fact actual documented history, or just one side of it? What do you think?
You're right, most of it is the victor's manuscript. And usually history is written in different ways. Sometimes history is written backed by a certain kind of ideology and philosophy. So I kind of, if I like an ideology, if I believe in an ideology, I'll read that author's history. See? The history which is being rewritten right now, I don't agree with it. So
Can you elaborate on that?
let's not elaborate on that. as far as the Ainek is concerned, and I'm making this film called Rag Desh, the Song of the Nation. It's about Netaji's International Army and how eventually the army, the INA lost, but they won us our freedom. It's very ironical, and the whole mystery behind Netaji and what happened to Netaji, which is there so much in the news these days. But I'm not really interested in what really happened to Netaji. I'm more interested in what he did for the country. So history is interesting. I've been a history student I'm from Allahabad University. So I've read some very serious history. So history is interesting because it tells us about our past, and if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to
repeat it. Yeah.
Repeat it. So I kind of really respect history, and I really all the time. This subject really interests me. I don't really read fiction too much. I only read politics and history and changes in society. So history in all forms is interesting, but if it is backed by an ideology which you believe in, it makes it more interesting.
Mr. Dharkar, you were with NFDC when Gandhi was commissioned. So what do you think about the film version of history? Is it okay to fictionalize? Recently we had an incident where a filmmaker was severely traumatized on his sets because he was sort of taking one side or portraying something. So what is your take on that? Should authors, filmmakers be allowed to give their version of history, or should they stick to facts? Are there in fact any facts?
Well, particularly about Gandhi, I think Richard Attenborough approached his subject with great reverence, and that shows through the film. For him, Mahatma Gandhi was really the Mahatma, and I think that's the reason the film worked, because he really made Gandhi such a great man, and the incidents were played up so very well with the right kind of sentiment and emotion. Now, if you set out to do the other kind of Gandhi film, which Richard Attenborough obviously wouldn't have done, but someone else could do, where you show a lot of the things that Gandhi did which were not Mahatma-like, and we know all about those, because a lot has been written about it. Unfortunately, we now live in an India where that would not be permitted. Though Mahatma Gandhi is worshipped only by default now, no one actually follows anything Gandhi has taught. But you try and make a film about Gandhi's his very strange ideas about relationships, about diet, about morality, etc. You make a film about that, and immediately all the hackles will rise. Mr. Nihalini will ban it. So this is where I think we need to change the thought process in our country. We need diversity of opinion. We need to see any man, however great he is, has a negative side. And we should be able to see that. We should be able to talk about it. We should be able to depict it in a movie. Right? As it is, history is never truly, is never the truth, in the sense that it is the truth as seen by a particular historian. And as you were saying, there is an approach, which is a philosophical, political approach. You could have a leftist history, you could have a right-wing history, and so on.
After a drink, I was going to say. So, films, books, art is supposed to hold up a mirror to society and provide a Rashomon-like perspective to an incident or whatever's happening in society at that point. If one side of that is shut down and only one side of the narrative is allowed to progress, then that becomes somebody's version of history, something that we've been reading for many, many years. So, your version as an artist.
Can you repeat that, please? Like I have to say, a book is one person's point of view. I mean, everybody's point of view, and a film is a director's point of view. So I think somewhere that is what it's all about. So unfortunately, in the country we are and the way things are, movies, books and any kind of idea has become a third person's point of view. Somebody else decides what you should write or you should do or you should think. It's a very confused situation. One has to work around creativity. So it's very hard to answer a question like that. It's very difficult. See, I'll tell you honestly, we are in a position, we are in time where you have to weigh every word you say. It's a horrible time. It's not good. It's not good.
Recently, the Oscars happened, and there was such a huge sort of uprising within the artistic community, whether they were cinematographers, actors, writers. Everyone was up in arms against what's happening with the policies of Trump. And Asghar Farhadi, who won the best foreign film, actually didn't come to the Oscars too. So as artists, as writers, as artists, should we not actually take some sort of a stand? But I think we're all really worried about our reputations and our bread and butter and all of that, and we don't actually take a stand in India about something like that. What do you think is the reason for that? Why are we not taking a stand?
We are too frightened and too small a community to take a stand for anything. We are not built to fight. We are not built to create riots, to throw stones at people. We are not the kind of people who are going to enter a place and create a riot. Therefore, we have to be quiet, unfortunately. I wish the government, the law would help us out. If tomorrow we have the whole artistic film writers community gets together, hires a whole lot of goons with sticks and stones, and we start protecting ourselves, there'll be no difference between anybody else and us. That's the sad part. I wish we had the government who would back us up, because we are not fighters.
Why would the government back you to talk against the government? That is a very unrealistic expectation. You have to, as artists, whether you're an actor or a writer or a director or whatever, you have to raise your voice. And I think when the conditions in the country are hostile, you need to raise your voice louder. And you can't wait for special dispensation to do that. It just has to come from you. It has to come from each one of us.
Many a times the industry has raised voice, but nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens.
Just sorry to cut you short. During the emergency in 1975, Devanand Saab floated a party against the Congress openly. और बहुत सारे members थे उनके, but nothing happened to the party because Congress also lost. But so he had the guts.
You know, Arshad, sorry. So I think as artists or writers or filmmakers, so we're not trying to start riots. We're not trying to. So what can we do? We tell stories. And just yesterday we were talking that actually human civilization started with telling stories. When we started to tell stories, we moved from being one kind of species to another. Stories are the biggest currency that human beings have. And that's what we deal in. So when we start telling stories, maybe, cleverly, surreptitiously, but when we start introducing ideas, when we start introducing other points of view, that's the kind of thing that I think artists can do. We can't go out there and start riots.
Stories are told to children by their parents right from birth. I don't know how much it has helped. We are not getting any better. You know what I mean? I mean, if telling stories, if that would help, I don't know what would help. We've gone to another level of discussion. But the fact is, I'm I'm not very happy with the way things are. So it hurts me.
No, but you're also wrong in expecting immediate results. Immediate results never come. It is attrition. You have to chip away. You have to keep chipping away. And I think the central message which has to go out, particularly now, is that patriotism is not just a case of waving a flag and becoming ultra-nationalist. Patriotism, the real patriotism, also involves correcting the faults of your society, which is being critical about society and all the wrongs in society. And our society is not perfect by any means. There are a huge number of things which are wrong with it. So if we talk about it, it is not being unpatriotic, it is being very patriotic.
So coming back to the book, this book raises the much needed dialogue and discussion about, I'd like the authors to jump in at this point, and talk about the narrative that this book has, because I'm married to one of the authors, so I have a little insider view into the book. So one of the narratives that is part of the book is the contribution that Bose and his men in khaki had to the freedom struggle. Sanjay, Namita?
There's large parts of our history, like they were talking about history backed by an ideology or a philosophy. But I think that there's a real danger in letting history serve an ideology. Because the moment you treat history as a slave or a servant, and you send it out in the world to do your bidding, then you're only propagating a certain kind of ideology, and more often than not imposing it on everybody else. I think we are in the real danger of that happening all the time. And again, I think it's the human condition. Humans acting in groups always try to impose their will and their opinion on others. This entire book actually started when we read an article in the London Telegraph, which was very, very strange, because in 2013, the National War Museum in London had this survey, and they had military historians do this survey, and they came out with an amazing fact, that the Battle of Kohima was the greatest battle that Britain had ever fought, which Namita had spoken about earlier. Now this is very surprising, because Britain in the European theatre has fought all their major wars, their major battles. One small cantonment town in the northeast, how could it even be possible that Britain or the English considered it to be the biggest battle? So that the entire process for this book, about this book and this story, started from there. And then we started doing research, and we understood that on that fateful day, which was 4/4/44, as in 4th April 44, Britain could actually have lost India. And this is borne out by their communications between Churchill and Mountbatten, who was the commander-in-chief here. And Churchill said that on my watch, no matter what happens, I would not want to lose India. I don't want to supervise the breakup of the empire. And what had happened is that in 2 days, in those 2 fateful days, I think the entire history of India actually took a wrong turn. Because if they had won, and they had won at Kohima, the road to Calcutta was open, there was nobody to oppose them, and India would have gone a completely different way. So this backdrop is what really excited us, and so we started asking the attorney, what if it wasn't a straightforward battle, but what if there was a betrayal? What if it was brought about by forces, desperate forces that came together at Kohima and to vie for the brightest jewel in the crown, which was India itself? And as we know, the history of battles and revolutions in India, betrayal is one strong undercurrent that runs through everything. I mean, in India it's famous that not every gun is trained at the enemy. There's been times when we've trained our guns upon each other and ourselves and brought down great things from happening. So that's how the process for this book started.
Sorry, yes, please.
I think we were talking about how history has there can be different viewpoints of history, and here where I would like to differ, because though of course this was a huge battle, and Britain really got a massive scare and they almost lost it. But I think suppose the INA had managed to get into Calcutta, I don't think the British would have been overthrown, because the INA didn't have the strength to carry on and conquer the whole country. What I think Subhash Chandra Bose was expecting or hoping was that India would arise, right, because the army had come in, and because the INA had come into Calcutta and Dhaka. Uh, but the British had put all our leadership into jail. Everyone was in jail at that time. So without that leadership, I don't know whether there would have been an uprising.
But Mr. Darkar, you know what happened? After the INA lost, and I think one should will know this whole history, of course. After the INA lost, the British were very triumphant, and they said, we're going to teach them a lesson. So they say that, they chose 3 men, and Subhash Chandra Bose himself couldn't have chosen better, because he chose a Muslim, a Sikh, and a Hindu, and he put them up for trial. And the British put them up for trial. And the whole point was that treason against emperor. But the point they made was, we are an independent government, we are a provisional government, and we do not owe allegiance to the crown. So when they actually fought the case, and those men were actually, sentenced to death, what happened was the country actually rose up. Even the leaders, if they weren't around, the Bombay Mutiny happened, and the kind of domino effect that started to happen. And finally they understood that there is actually no way that we can actually stay on in India. So though they didn't win, the point is that the kind of turning point was the fact that they fought. They didn't just lie down, and they didn't just keep on accepting, and they said, okay, it's something, even and what Subhash Chandra Bose keeps on saying, that, that idea that we have to sacrifice. Are you willing to do that? So they were willing to do that, and that is what caught, I think, the imagination of the entire country, and everybody. From that point onwards, they knew that they could stay on in India. And Sanjay, if you would like to share what you were talking about, that book that you...
Yeah, so it was, in fact, it reads like fiction. I mean, a really good author couldn't have thought of a better plot than this, because, in fact, Bose couldn't have asked for anything better to happen with what he was trying. And Tishu and I were discussing how ironical the entire experience must have been for the British, because what they were trying to prevent in actually smothering information about Bose and everything else, but when they put these 3 people on trial, they actually publicized what they were trying to actually keep under wraps. And when that happened, for the life of them, they couldn't have understood, because Bose's main aim was, he knew the INA was too strong, but it was a symbolic force. And he thought that the Indian army, that is the British Indian army, would actually rise in rebellion. They would see their brothers wearing another uniform, and they'd realize that they were mercenaries actually, and they would go over the other side, because that was the true Indian army, in his words. I mean, opinions can of course differ, but that never happened. However, because of the Red Fort trials, it all came to light, and India suddenly started becoming patriotic in a different kind of way. When their field marshal, Dr. Lake, was asked in 1942 that, can you hold India? His reply was, I have no reason to suspect the loyalty of the Indian sepoy, sepoy as they used to call them. But in 1945, when he was asked the same question, he did not reply for a long time. And when he replied, he says, I have no answer to give. I cannot guarantee the loyalty of the Indian sepoy today, because he has seen what it is to be Indian. So their foundations were shaking. And when the first mutiny, the naval mutiny, happened in Bombay, they realized that they could not hold on anymore. There is a very interesting book which is out now called Holding On to the Jewel. And it's by a British historian who's, again, there's been records that have now come out in the open, and documents and files, secret files and everything. And it's amazing that the British actually never intended to leave India. And strangely enough, they had earmarked a plot, 150 acres in size, outside Delhi, to keep as their embassy. A 150-acre plot, which would help India militarily and economically. They wanted to hold on even then, because they thought that they could give some form of autonomy, people would be happy, and they would never have to leave. So what compelled them to leave ultimately was the fact that they did not have the manpower, the sepoy, the eternal sepoy who guarded every cantonment. They did not have him on their side, and they could not hold on to his loyalty. They decided that before they are slaughtered to a man, which was a nightmare from the 57 mutiny, they better leave. And their communications that happened at that time bear this out to a large extent.